right, we're gonna go ahead and get started here and just want to say welcome. Welcome for everyone who has tuned in this evening for NAAHP's symposium, our digital symposium that we've been going through with COVID-19 in the mix. Can you imagine? It's been six months that we've been in this, and so we just want to extend a great thank you for all of those who have not only viewed us online, but also tuned in thereafter, watched our content, and be able to take that in. And we just want to say thank you. My name is Samuel Buissereth, Samuel Buissereth pour les intimes, and so I'm the digital marketer manager over at NAHP, and it's a true honor to be able to host this evening's symposium. And I have with me a fantastic individual that we're going to learn more about. I do have some thank yous to give out as well right before we get started. So for one, it's going to be all of the folks behind the scenes to put this off. It's fantastic because they work tirelessly to make this happen. So thank you. The other is going to be our media sponsor, Chocolila. If you've ever had anything to say about Haiti, it's that we have a true gem with Karel and his crew. So thank you. And we can't forget our hashtag. If you're going to go ahead and tweet us or post something about our symposium, don't forget it's NAAHP COVID-19 Symposium. NAAHP COVID-19 Symposium. So thank you. Tonight, we have the pleasure of introducing and having a great conversation with Frère Reginald Jean-Marie. And it's fantastic that we have him here because he's going to open up with some of the things that we have for you tonight about COVID-19, and we're going to dive into some of the BLM movement as well. Our perspective tonight, if you were ever wondering, it's going to be finding hope and maintaining faith during uncertainty. I'll repeat it again. Finding hope and maintaining faith during uncertainty. I think in a time like this, there are a lot of moving parts, and we have the opportunity to filter through some of those things and what we are going to have discussion over tonight. So I want to say welcome, and to Frère Reginald Jean-Marie, we'd like for you to go ahead and introduce yourself, because I could ramble on about all of your accomplishments, but I'll let you do that.
Thank you, Samuel. It's a wonderful pleasure to be with you as well. And most especially, I would like to extend my gratitude to Serge and to Atali, who did a fantastic job in getting me here with you. And thank you for having accepted to host this great event today and to be the moderator for such a great encounter that we're having at the NAAHP. So I welcome all our viewers, and it's a pleasure and it's a blessing to be with you. Once again, blessing to each and every one of you. So to introduce myself, I'll begin only by telling you that I'm Father Reginald Jean-Marie. I was born in Haiti. I grew up in Haiti. And then at the age of 19, I joined the priesthood. And I did a few studies in Europe. And later on, I finished my philosophical and theological studies in Miami. And in 2001, I was ordained a priest for the Archdiocese of Miami. And since then, I was assigned to Notre Dame de Haiti in Little Haiti, Miami, where I've been serving as an assistant pastor, and 2 years in 2003 as the pastor of this church. So since 2001, I've been living and ministering in Little Haiti to the people of God, and it has been one of the most wonderful experiences in my life. And tonight I can tell you how happy I am to be in such a great symposium, the NAAHP COVID-19 Symposium.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So a little bit of a nugget, if you will, for those watching. I remember when I used to live in Little Haiti at the time in Miami, when all of those things were happening. And I must admit, the atmosphere was eclectic. So thank you for all of the things that you have contributed to the community over there. It is definitely monumental. Now, one of the things that we have been asked, if you will, for how we should handle this pandemic and all of the things that are going on at the same time is, where is God in this, right? And many people want to know, is this the end of the world? I'm in youth ministry here in Atlanta, and I hear this question regularly. So we'd love to find out from your perspective is, what do you think about that, the end of the world as we know it in 2020?
Well, as you remember very well, Samuel, I don't know how young you were at that time in 2000. So there was that obsession with the end of the world. Everybody was talking about the end of the world as if the world was coming to an end. And we see that kind of attitude very often in the church, in the world, what we call the millenarist. Every time that you come into a century or to 1,000 years, people always trying to foresee or to predict the end of the world. But what is happening today, especially I remember in the outbreak of the pandemic, I heard that from my parishioners. I heard that from many people talking about, oh, that will be the end of the world. That's the end of the world. When we see how many people dying in Italy, when we saw how the prime minister of Italy came to an end and said, you know what, I cannot do it again. We tried everything. So God, it's up to you now. You know, when you see a leader of the free world come into that, to surrender before the majesty of God, so you said, wow, that must be the end of the world. When you see how many people have died now, we got 212,000 people who lost their lives only in the land of America. Right. So that tells us, wow, that must be the end of the world. But for us as Christians, and more especially in the Roman Catholic Church, we don't talk too much about the end of the world, but rather sign of the times. What sign of the times? What is happening today to me is a sign of the times. How do we define sign of the times? Sign of the times is always a calling, an invitation for us to do some soul searching so that we see where we are with ourselves, we are with God, and we are with one another. Because we live today in a world that tend to worship creation and ignore the creator. We forget who we are. We forget what we have called to be and to become. We forget where we come from. We forget that we are created beings and that God is the creator. And sometimes we have been going so far. So sign of the times always brings us back to reality so that we can do that soul searching in finding out what is essential in life. Because sometimes we tend to forget what is essential to embrace a lot of other things that do not matter, that cannot have an impact on our souls and our telos as human beings. Because as you remember, the telos of every Christian, every child of God, is that one day we can live in the total happiness of God. And sometimes we search for happiness where happiness is not. And so the pandemic reminds us our vulnerability, our dependency on God. And also, sign of the times is always a calling in a sense where it invites us to be human,
I have a question for you, because then as human beings and being human, is there a level that things have to reach for us to realize the impact of the sign of the times? In other words, how bad do things have to get before we realize the end of times? The sign of the times is at hand.
Well, as you know, from our human nature, the human nature is not always a democratic nature. So we tend to be very rebellious. And we always try to procrastinate or to believe oh, I will have time to do it. I'll have time. Or we try to be rebellious, oh, I don't want to do it, I can do it on my own. That's not true. And with that nature, uh, it always gets worse before we can come to our senses and say, you know what? No, I must do something with myself. And the problem also with human beings, you and I, is that we tend to forget very often. For example, today we are in the midst of the pandemic. Everybody is
Right.
talking about God. Everybody is praying. Once things get well, and we forget where we come from. And we saw that happen with the earthquake in Haiti. On the day
It's
of the
true.
earthquake, everybody was calling Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. You went to a church in Haiti at that time. I had several missions in Haiti. Everybody was praying. And then
Right.
what happened now in Haiti? We go back to even to the worst state of being and living that we were before. And that's the reason why Son of the Times always invites us to come to the senses, to come to the reality, to come to who we are, to the essence of our human nature and our Christian nature, so that we can understand that we are not God. We are the tenants of the world, but God is the owner of the world.
Oh, I'm glad you placed it that way, because there is a sense of the way we move around with our lives and how we cater to the things that happen on a regular basis. And then when we get devastating news or go through an
Yeah.
experience that is forcing us to deal with a crisis, like the earthquake, there are those of us who feel that, well, maybe this is punishment for the wrongdoing that we as humanity we have created this. So maybe we are being punished, maybe we are cursed because of this, and as a result, the if you will, consequences of what we have done wrong throughout the course of history, now we have to go through a pandemic like this to reset things. I'd love to hear your opinion about whether or not this is something we'd have to consider as punishment.
Well, I'm not. I'm going to defer to one of the statements that the great Reverend Pat Robertson did said. By trying to think, oh, that the earthquake in Haiti was a punishment because we worship voodoo and all those things.
That's
One
right.
thing I do believe. One thing I believe, that our God is a loving God.
Yes.
The desire of God for humanity is that humanity live and live in total happiness. Jesus even said that. I have come so that you can live with joy, so that you can live in total happiness. Like I stated before, the telos of every Christian is that one day we can enter into the eternal happiness of God, because God is a loving God. I cannot imagine God to punish his children. No. If this is the God I believe in, and if my God is a God who punishes, who does wrong to his children, I stop believing in him. But I do believe that I believe that my God is a loving God. He doesn't do that. The only thing we need to understand is that creation is a gift. The environment is a gift. And from the book of Genesis, God asks us to dominate the world and to take care of it. Because
Right.
the environment, the cosmos, is the sacrament of God's love to humanity. When you look at even John Glenn in 1998,
That's
as
right.
he was crossing the galaxies, he looked at them, the order of the galaxies. He said, you know what? The hands of human being could not put that together. It must be a divine hands. And upon coming on earth, he gave his life to the Lord. And I think that's something we need to acknowledge, that God is great. Our God is merciful. He's loving. God will never punish his children. Very often what happens is the consequence of our inconsequences. And therefore, it is very important for us to be very mindful, to take care of creation, to take care of one another, to live in that spirit of love that God invites us, so that we can live in the happiness that he has called us to live and to share with other people.
Oh, wow. Well put. Well put. I think what's important to take away from some of those things is definitely to consider not only our role in creation, but also where our trust will evidently lie in. I think part of that discussion is we're trying to make sure that we have a responsibility that God has called us to, and that we are being upheld by that responsibility, being accountable, if you will, to make
Yes.
sure that what we are while we are going through life and while we have dominion over earth, there's a sense of responsibility that we do take care
Yes.
of it.
Sure.
I think what's important now, and maybe this is something that we can dive in even further, is since God is loving, since He is caring, since He's a
Mhm.
just God, where does He fit in all of this chaos, and what role does He play? I'd like to know your opinion on that.
Well, one thing, Samuel, I do believe that in every darkness, there is always a pinpoint of light. In every darkness, there is always a pinpoint of light. God is never absent. I remember as I was in front of the cathedral in Haiti after the earthquake, there was a journalist from Belgium who saw a lady, an old lady, opening her arms before a crucifix that was broken, and then the corpus of Christ was on the cross. And the journalist asked the lady, "Well, to whom are you praying? Because you know what? Look at what happened to your country. Do you believe that God is here? Do you believe that God exists?" She said, "You know what? He is my God. He is alive." We must always understand that amidst any chaos, amidst any darkness, there is always a pinpoint of light. That pinpoint of light is the presence of God. So when God never promises us that we're going to live a life without suffering, without pandemic, without earthquake, without storms. The only thing that God gives us assurance to is that in every storm that we are, in every suffering that we face, Christ is with us. We are never alone. As we remember what happened to in Matthew 14, verse 27, when Peter was about to sink as he was walking into the water, he cried out to Jesus and said, "Save me, help me." Jesus reproached him because of his lack of faith, because of his doubt. Jesus said, "Believe, trust me, it's me. Be not afraid." And today, that's what we need to remind people. Be not afraid. Despite we see death around, because today we are living in a culture of death. We saw so many people dying, around us, and we must always understand that death cannot be the end of human beings. It is
Wow.
only the possibility of our impossibilities, and God is always present with us. God is not going to let us down. We shall overcome.
No, that's fantastic. I think that's probably one of my top stories from the Bible is when you see someone like Peter who was very, very understanding of who Jesus is, but as a human being, he needed that extra push to
Yes.
put his faith into action, and
Definitely.
being able to put that trust publicly and rely on his Savior. I think part of it too in that case is that we would have loved for Peter to be able to embrace some of the turmoils that were going through at the time, the storm that was going on in
Mhm.
the Sea of Galilee, everyone on
Yes.
the boat. And so you would have wanted him to say, you know what? Okay, here is my situation. Here is where we are at this moment. There is a lot going on. And although I'm the experienced fisherman, this is uncharted territory. And it's not the most organized way that I normally go out at sea. And this
Mhm.
is probably a different type of storm that I have gone through in my profession, in my career.
Yes.
And I guess my not opinion, but question for you would be, what kind of embrace should we have going into the rest of the year? We have a couple of months left. Should we prepare for something worse? And if we should, what does that look like?
If you look at the theme that we have chosen for tonight,
Mhm.
is we are in search of hope. We are called to live in hope. We are the people of hope. And we cannot continue to believe that things are going to get worse. Even that happen, because we do not know the future. The future doesn't belong to us. It is a mystery to live. But at the same time, we got to continue to hope against all hope, as St. Paul will tell us. And therefore, I would not assume that things are going to get worse. What needs to be done, like you were talking about responsibility, we got to act as responsible beings. Because if you go to the book of Buissereth in chapter 38, verse 1, what does the Lord say? God said, you know what? Give the doctors the honor that they deserve. Give them the honor that they deserve. We got to respect science. It is very important that we listen to the voice of science on this 21st century, especially now. Follow the regulations that CDC give us. Do not continue to say, you know what, God is good. I am praying. I am fasting. I am doing all those pilgrimage. I'm not going to die. I shall live to see the glory of God. Do not pretend while we are not pretending. The good Christians must have his head or her head up and your feet on the ground. Smell the coffee. We live in a world today where we need to protect ourselves as a priest. I am not going to go crazy, all over as I used to do ministry in the hospitals, in the nursing homes. I got to watch after myself because my life is a gift. But at the same time, I remain open to continue my ministry to the people of God. We got to follow the CDC rules, the regulations, the 6 feet distance, wear our mask, wash our hands, sanitize, do everything we can to protect ourselves. If we do that, Dr. Fauci, all the scientists tells us, you know what? We can bring that to an end. We got the Spanish flu in 1918. But the people behaved themselves and they were able to put it to rest. I don't believe that COVID-19 can live an eternity. I don't believe that. There is only one person who is eternal. His name is God. And because God has the control of everything, COVID-19 cannot be eternal. We got to continue to hope against all hope, but we got to act as responsible beings. And also, we got to be our brothers' keepers, our sisters' keepers. We got to watch after one another. I'm not giving you COVID-19. I don't want you to give it to me, so therefore, we got to protect one another. We got to act as responsible beings. That's what responsibility is all about. You watch over your brother, you watch over your sister. You watch after your brother, you watch after your sister. And also, this is the time for solidarity. We got to understand that what is happening today is a time that requires a testimony of solidarity. We are living today under the great dictatorship of indifference, where people try to be indifferent to one another. This is the time to show compassion. Not because I have one member in my family, one parishioner who has COVID-19, I'm going to be indifferent to that person. I'm going to isolate that person, because God never created us to live in isolation. We must live in the spirit of coexistence, and therefore, if somebody is down on the ground, go after, try to help, try to give whatever we can to bring that person on his or her feet, because the glory of God is a man and standing on his feet, or a woman standing on her feet. It is a big challenge, but also we must acknowledge that faith is a power. The more we believe, the more power we have. Paul in Hebrew 11 verse 6 tells us that, in order for God to do something for us, we must believe. We must believe, because God doesn't want to save us without us. He wants our collaboration. And that's where God respects the freedom as well as the potentials that he puts in us. We must pray, because prayer is a power. So we believe, we live in solidarity, we share with one another, we show compassion to one another, and above all, we respect the teachings of science. We follow the rules of science. If we do that, I cannot believe that things will get worse.
That's
It shall improve, and we shall go back to the way we used to be, and even a better way.
Right, right. I think you touched on a really good point there, where if we are anticipating something worse because of all of the things we are going through, then there's some of that pessimistic side of us that comes
Yeah.
through, because now it's as if we are anticipating the worst,
Mm-hmm.
therefore we're expecting the worst and we're preparing for the worst.
Yes.
There's only one option that we are getting ready for, which is the inevitable. It's the worst, rather
Exactly.
than trusting our Creator, trusting God, being able to orchestrate all of this. I'm glad you mentioned Hebrew, which is a really good book as well. Part of what I think is important is that as we coexist and we are living through this life together, there are a lot of things that we as human beings will go through emotionally, and that wave, if you will, of ups and downs. Just a little bit of insight from your end. What has that looked like when it comes to church membership, as your parishioners are handling things like whether it be a church attendance, whether it be meditation, whether it be fellowship with one another? Because I remember you brought up that the way you do ministry is different nowadays, and
Yeah.
the way you go about visiting some of the church members and the way you go about your pastoral duties. What does that look like now that you have had to make that shift, if you will?
Well, one thing that we need to understand, leadership is very important. Leadership is very important in this moment. And the great thing that happened right after the outbreak of the pandemic is that our shepherd, the Archbishop, who really led us in the right paths, by asking us to just close the church.
Right,
Close the church is basically asking the parishioners not to show up, but the church was not really closed uh, uh,
right,
in spirit, because we used to continue having mass and also to visit people. Even we do it in a very limited way with a lot of precautions. But at the same time, the church was always present. The doors of the church at that time remained open, and if somebody showed up, we would not turn anybody down. So what have changed is the fact that the strength of the church is in the community. The experience of church is always an experience of encounter with the other. So, as a pastor, my greatest joy on Sunday is when I'm at the door greeting my parishioners, welcoming them, uh, giving them a smile, wishing them a good Sunday, a good week. So, the fact that we cannot do that now, there is a shift. But it's something that we have been preparing for a long time. I remember on March 9, 1983, when St. Pope John Paul II visited Haiti, he came up with a very interesting theme called the new evangelization. And he stated that the church must walk the path of a new evangelization, and that new evangelizations must be new in the methods that we are going to use. And later on, he wrote a great document, an encyclical about the mass media, where he put a great emphasis on the importance of the mass media. And he even stated if Jesus were present with us on earth physically, he would have used the mass medias, now the social medias. So therefore, I believe that, and I believe that's one of the greatest things that happened to us. And there is a sense of rebirth in terms of the pastoral ministry, in terms of ministry. If you go back to the Act of the Apostles in chapter 2, or in the early Christian communities, that's what we call the domestic church, where the families used to gather together to pray. And this is what is happening today via the Facebook, YouTube. I am able to reach more people. For example, I used to have a daily mass with 25 people. Now I got 1,000 or more, even 4,000 people participating in a mass. This is a beauty. This is, I would call it one of the spiritual revolution, nowadays. And that's the reason why it is very important for us to understand that there is a new way of doing ministry. It is evident. And in terms of our parishioners, so we reopened the church on June 1st, on the day of Pentecost, after 3 months of not having the faithful present, but still respecting the 6 feet distance. Everybody wears a mask to come to church. We have people at the door sanitizing the hands of the people. So we make sure, and we invite people to act as responsible people. If you feel that you are sick, don't come. If you know that you are infected, it is very important that you watch over your borders. So far, after June to October now, we are doing excellent. So we have not registered any case, and we must attribute that also not only to our own efforts, but also to God's providence.
So, that's fantastic. And we're going to dive into some of the technicality of what you've been able to do with technology and ministry a little bit later, but I'm glad you hinted towards that, because you're right. It has changed in the way ministry is done. And of course, that fellowship has changed too, where it's used to be in a building, we gather together in one central place, and now that shift has happened. It's allowed us to have access to a whole lot larger of an audience. So more on that for sure.
Yes.
I would love to find out your take on this, if you will, this new wave of what us as human beings should go through healing wise. I think part of the discussion now is that one, is this the new normal? And two, the sensitivity of a lot of things that have been going on in our society. First, dealing with the pandemic of COVID-19, and now layering in the racial tension. The BLM movement is humongous right now. And for whatever it's worth, it has shed some light on a lot of things that were probably left under the rug, or even magnified now that there is media to zoom in on those things. I'd love to find out from your perspective, how do you heal from all of that?
Well, I think I have dwelt into that in some scattered way, but I'm going to be more systemic in the way that we can talk about that healing process. One of the things that remains evident, and I'll begin with that point, that we cannot be healed without the healer by excellence. And that's the reason why I'll begin with prayer. The first thing that remains very significant in the healing process is prayer. For example, one thing that I've come to acknowledge during this pandemic, and especially with the live streaming, the technology that we are using, you can see that everywhere, Facebook now is being dominated with religious activities. Something that before we used to see as devilish, but now becomes the greatest tool of blessing for us.
Right. That's true.
So there is a change of paradigm in the way that we are doing things. So, and it really touched my heart when I see that people are so present in different ministries. They finish mass here, they finish service with Father Reginald, they go to Pastor Gregory, they go to other things. So that's one of the things. And it breaks a lot of barriers too. It goes beyond religion. Because before we used to talk about religion, Baptists, Adventists, people are searching for God. They are not searching about pastor or priest. They are searching for God. And they are looking for prayer. And I've heard it from my parishioners or the people. What matters to us is prayer. Wherever there is prayer, wherever we can find God, we are present. And I think this is one of the most beautiful things. There were people that probably before that were very indifferent to the faith.
That's true.
Now they are participating. You know, there is a rebirth in terms of the spiritual life. And to me, that's something paramount. And also,
Mhm.
one thing that is very important, I will tap on it, is this is a time for sharing. It is a time
Ooh.
for sharing. For
Mhm.
example, as you can see, before we used to think that misery or poverty only exists in Africa, in Haiti, in Latin America, or the Caribbean. But you know, under the bridges of America now,
Yeah.
in our neighborhood, there are
Yes.
people dying of hunger. There are people who cannot pay their rent. There are
That's
people on the
true.
streets. There are people who are suffering. And therefore, it is very important that we learn to share like the early Christian communities used to share what they had with one another. I
Mhm.
think it is a time that we open the ears of our hearts
Mhm.
and to listen to the cries of our brothers and sisters. And this is one of the things that we did at Notre Dame de Haiti right after the outbreak of the pandemic. The courageous young people of the church, and I continue to commend them for what they did. They
Yes.
decided to risk their lives. The
Mhm.
superintendent, Alberto Cavallo, and as
Mhm.
well as the Archbishop of Miami, Monsignor Wensky, and the director of Catholic Charities, Peter, came to me and said, what could we do? And then they have decided to give some money. And we found some volunteers from the church because we have an industrial kitchen. They cooked, and we got 25 to 27 young adults, the Good Samaritans of the church,
Mhm.
with other people from different groups and choirs that took the streets. They go to the elderly home, they go to the nursing homes, they went to the Domino's table in Little Haiti, they keep walking the streets, inviting people to come out. And what touched me, I've been to all of them, and what touched me the most, you see Hispanics, Anglo, Haitians,
Yes.
Black Americans, everybody coming out for at least we gave two plates of meals for Saturday and Sunday.
It's Sunday.
That showed me to where people were because there were many elderly. We have an intergenerational community in Little Haiti
Mhm.
where we have a fountain of youth, but as well as the pioneers of this community. The elderly that did not have the stamina or the energy or the mobility to go to the oven, the kitchen to cook. By when they saw us, they felt happy. Not because of the meal we gave them, but the presence. The presence. Because the human soul, the human heart, the human spirit
Spirit.
were craving for a sacred presence. Like I said before, life is about
Right.
encounter with the other. And the fact that we came out to meet them where they were, it was the greatest moment for them. They felt that they were not alone in this. So,
Right.
and that's where we kick into the spirit of solidarity. This is the time for solidarity, that women and live in solidarity with one another. If
Mhm.
somebody is on the ground, like John and Holmes said, the greatest exercise we can do with our heart is not going to the
Exactly.
gym or to do diet, is to bend down
Bend
and pick
down.
up the one on the ground and get that person on his or her feet. So that's what I believe the healing process is about that. And above all, I would say that the healing process is about, it's an attitude. It is an
Mhm.
attitude. We must have a positive attitude towards life. We must fight any structure that tends to reduce us to a state of non-being so that we can transcend the negative spirit and be who God calls us to be and to become. First of all, a human being, being with other people, a Christian, and also the feet of Jesus, the hands of Jesus, the heart of Jesus, the eyes of Jesus, so that the glory of God can shine, not just today, but tomorrow and forever.
Ever. Man, I tell you, it's important for us to, if you will, acknowledge a couple of things. I think part of that whole healing process is that for the longest time, we have probably been stuck in our own bubble, if you will, if
Yes,
we want to be
yes.
realistic about the
Big time,
situation.
big time.
Our bubble could be anywhere from our race, right? Our
Definitely,
ethnicity,
definitely.
culture, last name, socioeconomic status, who we work for, where we live. There are
Yes.
so many bubbles that we could create. Probably have created for ourselves that probably allowed us to function without taking too much risk or even being too much more uncomfortable with ourselves. Because
Hmm.
as long as we uh, clocked in, clocked out, we're good. We know where we live. We don't talk too much to some of our neighbors. And then do we dare connect with someone outside of that? And then 2020 comes along and says, wait a minute, wait a minute. If you knew anything about the way society functions, and if you forgot that you don't need people to function in life, well, Melly, this is it, right? This is the big
Yes.
giant in the room, which says, do you know what? If I'm going to rely on my friends and family, that brother and sister, or even at times a complete stranger to make this life work, now's the time. I'm
Yeah.
relying on that other person to wear a mask, just like I will wear a mask, not necessarily for my benefit, but for the benefit of the other. It's
Amen.
remarkable how much that all of us have now had to step into the role of being a good Samaritan, stepping into the role of being able to sacrifice a lot of the incidentals of our lives and the
Hmm.
comfortability now, but to
Yes.
make it work, to step into a role that says, I'm going to take ownership of what I can while helping others, and we are in this together. I think one of the toughest things that I've experienced
Hmm.
in recent weeks is that, and I think you hinted towards this earlier, is this toll that this year has taken
Hmm.
mentally on a lot of people.
Yes.
Seeing that shift of extroverted
Hmm.
people now have to be at home and boxed up to make things work. The
Yes.
shy people now have to speak up if they're gonna say, "Hey, go get your mask," or "What you are doing is wrong." And it's been remarkable to see the mental stress, if you will,
Hmm.
of what we as human beings have had to go through. Because do we dare say, before this, life was pretty comfortable, pretty stagnant.
Yes.
So I'd love to know, what are your takes on some of the mental stress points that have been going on, and what should someone do during this time?
Well, this is a very interesting topic, Samuel.
Mhm.
Especially that we know that mental health, it's a very it's a subject that is taboo in our community.
Right.
Or people don't want to talk about mental health issues, and
Mhm.
it is something that is knocking at our community very deep now. It
Yes.
has been a long time that it has been an issue, and we have been attributed to supernatural powers, or
Mhm.
people take refuge in terms of spiritual uh, life, or we have a lot of irresponsible ministers in the
Mhm.
world that are exploiting the weaknesses of people, or
Right.
making them, thinking, that somebody is after them, they are being persecuted, instead of facing the reality. And that's what the great psychiatrist, Canadian theologian Scott Peck called the people of lies. We have been living under that great dictatorship of lies, where we refuse to face the elephant that has been
In
in
the
the room.
room.
And
Mhm.
so today, I can tell you, if there is one thing I'm praying and hoping that our community will come to establish, and every elected official or community leader or spiritual leaders that I've been talking to, I tell them, listen, there is going to be a need for mental health center in our community, because this is becoming a big issue, not just for the person who's suffering, but also for the family. And this time requires a high level of compassion, of mercy, of tolerance, and also that we must have the understanding of what is happening. We are not going to, I am not going to tell people, listen, let's pray about it, but rather let's face it. We got to be professional about it. If you come to me, we got people with schizophrenia. We got people with who are bipolar. And sometimes when the people come to us, what they ask, oh, pray for me, Father, or do an exorcism. I have to be honest. I have to be blunt with those people and telling them, listen, from what I am understanding, that level of hallucination, that level of delusion, that manifestation is not something spiritual. What I can do is to seek a professional, see what we can do to help. Prayer is very important. I'm not denying it. But at the same time, we got to place prayer where prayer belongs. St. Augustine was very good when he said, faith is important, but understanding as well is very important. I believe in order to understand, and I understand in order to believe. So therefore, it is very important for us to address that issue from a scientific standpoint, but also from a human, emotional standpoint, from a compassionate humanitarian standpoint, but as well as from a spiritual standpoint. I believe that mental health is not something science can cure. Some science can help somebody to cope with whatever they're going through, but in the final analysis, God has the power to heal, like Jesus did it for so many in his ministry. But at the same time, we as human beings, we as families, we as friends, we cannot put labels on people. We cannot demonize people who are sick. We need to demonstrate compassion, solidarity. We need also to help the family members who are facing that challenge. This is not the time, to blame a young person who has mental issue or somebody who's having mental issue. For example, in my church now, we got cases where during the mass, during the service, we got some members with mental health, especially now. They are living in isolations, people are in confinement. It becomes more prevalent to see people manifesting certain behaviors. Right. And when that happen, you see some members of the church looking at those people as being bad. Sometimes they are not even responsible of their behaviors. I think this is the time for us as a church to show compassion, to be more tolerant, and at the same time to understand that they are the broken today. Tomorrow I can be the broken, and the broken must be the broken, so that together we can find the path, of happiness and healing.
No, that's fantastic. I think, oh man, this is good because there's a sense of optimism now.
Yes.
We've completely went through the middle part, a majority of the year, in this desperation or even depression mode, if you will.
Oh, yes.
And now that we are, as human beings, we're one of God's wonderful miracles and creations. And now we're able to adapt to some of the things that have happened. There's a sense of optimism and how we look at our spiritual lives moving forward. I know you mentioned particularly the way you've had to shift in ministry, and in a sense, bringing it up to the 21st century, right? You mentioned the domestic church, l'Église domestique, and now it's like l'Église globale. And with a lot of that, there is a sense of renewedness about our spiritual lives. So I guess coming from someone who has had to deal with that transition, we know, and we've had discussions and symposium conversations about the way the business sector has shifted from being in the office to now at home and remote. What have you seen in the ministry that has shifted to that extent where now you're, talking about live streaming, talking about conference prayer lines, and and maybe even having smaller meeting groups, if you will. What has that been like in your experience?
Beautiful, fantastic. So in everything like I said, in every darkness there is always a pinpoint of light. Whatever goes wrong, something good will come out of it. So I am a firm believer that that good can come out of something that does not seems to be good. So all that we have to do is to remain attentive and to be creative. So the beauty about spirituality is that spirituality is always creative. There is always a creativity about spirituality. Spirituality is not something static and fixed. It is something dynamic. There is a level of mystery, in spirituality that we need to tap on. And when we face that mystery, all that we have to do is to let God be God and to let that mystery be mystery. So if you look at the Bible, the whole history of the Bible, you will see that there is always a sense of renewal. History never repeats itself this way. History keeps moving, especially when you go to Hegel philosophy of history, something dynamic, something revolutionary. So in spirituality is something like this that you see. For example, now we can say that there is a spiritual revolution. A spiritual revolution. Because now we used to think that if somebody doesn't come to church, that person is the worst person ever. The person is a devil, But now people can pray everywhere, People can pray everywhere. Though I still believe that community is very important and is the climax. But at the same time, we cannot force somebody to come to church while the consequences won't be good for that person. Or that person is in a very vulnerable position and that person will get infected easily and lose their life. You don't want that to happen.
No.
But at the same time, the beauty about the live streaming spirituality, as you call it, as you refer to it, and I like it, is the fact that it broadens our vision of church. It gives us a global understanding of church. It helps us to discover that God, what I call the transatlantic, the transpacific, the transcaribbean vision of church, where God is not just in our own corner, God is a mystery. You and I, we cannot box God or reduce God to just a Baptist, an Adventist, or a Catholic. God is God, and therefore I think that's what we are experiencing today. That is the beauty. There is a great advantage to it, and also, can you imagine? I am not somebody who is very literate from a technological standpoint, but since they are woodwork, I have learned so much. That forced me to learn many things, and also I have learned so many other jargon, so many other things. I remember one of my tech support in the church used to try to drag me into so many things, and I was resisting. But now he said, "Look at how Father Reggie is now the one pushing me for a lot of other things." So I think it's very important. Yeah, I even look at people, who never thought that they could have managed to set up the YouTube or to even subscribe to a mass, to a channel, to a program, and now they are doing it. For example, I see the elderly from my church coming and ask us to set up, to subscribe them so that they can watch. So this is a revolution. This is a revolution. True. I think that's a beauty. But also, there is a downfall to it. We must admit, like I told you before, community is the climax of the church. The church is the people of God. The church is who we are. The church is always an encounter. We define ourselves when we meet the other. We define ourselves in that coexistence level. We define ourselves where we can transcend, the ghetto mentality, where we can transcend our little corner and to meet the people from the global systemic view. And I think we miss that. I miss that very, very much. And I pray and hope that we could get back. But at the same time, to be honest with you, it is very good now because I can touch more lives now in my preaching, in my ministry. I can reach out to more souls, and I think this is something beautiful. And even financially, it can be a good benefits. So we got to also address that. We cannot be shy about it. So, and also, and the good thing about it is the fact that you see there is a sense of renewal in the church. Clericalism is dead now. Clericalism is dead now. It is not only the pastor or the priest who can preach. It is not only the pastor or the priest who can pray. You know, other people can pray. Ordinary people, lay people can pray. And therefore, we celebrate that and we let God be God and let His mystery be mystery while we continue to do what we are called to do, to be presence of His visible kingdom on earth today and forever.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. I think what you mentioned there is so crucial for us to realize the access that we now have. There were so many excuses for why someone would not take their faith seriously. Oh, I don't have a ride. Oh, it's wrong schedule. I work.
No excuse.
Right. There's literally none now where you can have access to God in such a way that the church is now able to reach more hands and feet for His kingdom. I think part of it too is that in that accessibility, you're right. That we should not forget community. Although community has probably changed in the definition of what we thought would be a church community. The central location was nice. Embrasser and saying hi to someone face to face and having great conversation one-on-one. Well, now that has changed and it has had to adjust. However, we should capitalize off of the things that have been able to be at our disposal. Because I can remember vividly hearing while in church, Facebook is bad, Twitter is bad, YouTube is a sin, and now this is the new normal.
This is the way to go.
This is it, and it's a tool. I think what's nice about it, and the tool, and do we dare say the ministries that are able to adapt and adjust to the new medium, they'll be able to have access to that and capitalize off of it. So thank you so much. Any last closing remarks as we end tonight's symposium?
In the first letter to the Thessalonians, Paul reminds us that we must have an attitude of gratitude. And therefore, I would like to express my gratitude to you. You are an excellent moderator. Very proud to meet you. Proud of you, proud of who you are and what you are doing. I would like also to extend un baisser chapeau bien bas pour NAAHP for what they are doing. I continue to commend them. I'm a firm believer in that work that they have been doing, and I pray that the Lord will continue to bless them and to help them next year to be able to convene the way that they used to convene. So I would like to extend my gratitude to anyone who was present with us online on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and to thank them very much for your participation, your active participation with us. So, and I would like to commend the Lord who had inspired us to have that great sharing, that great encounter together. And also I would like to invite people, especially next week, October 18 to the 24th, we begin one of the greatest spiritual revival at Notre Dame de Haiti in Little Haiti called Jericho. C'est Jericho, and the theme is Suspend compter problème, compter bénédiction. Stop counting your problem, count your blessing. So I'd like to invite everybody. We begin on Sunday 18 at 3 p.m. and from Monday to Friday at 7 p.m. You can tune in Facebook, YouTube, and then you will be able to participate with us. And never forget, and don't forget, October 18 in Florida is the time you can do early voting. Make sure you cast your vote. Your vote is your voice. And also the census is at work. Please register. And above all, praise and glory to the Lord today and forever. Amen, Samuel.
Thank you so much for that blessing. Amen.
Yes,
And I
indeed.
appreciate the opportunity that you allowed us to have together. I think it was well spent, and for the
Yeah.
fact that we are here together and having this great conversation. Please, those who are watching, continue with this conversation. I know the playback will be online, so celebrate with us throughout the end of the year. I believe Jericho is a fantastic theme. So please, if you want to prep for that, go read the story in the Bible. You won't be disappointed.
Let's break the walls.
Exactly. Break the walls. Break those walls. So thank you so much, Reginald, for the time out of your busy schedule to be able to have this conversation. Thank you for the NAAHP staff that was able to put this on. We appreciate all of the hard work and all of our partners that are across the world that always tend to chime in and share with the conversation. And of course, our official media partner, Shokurila, thank you so much once again. Karel and the rest of his staff, we appreciate all of the work that you all do. So thank you for joining us in. With that said, this is Samuel Buissereth with NAAHP. Thank you so much. This was a great time this evening with each other, and continue to being a light in this world. And we appreciate all of the folks who are able to be here and view in. So thank you for what you all do in the community. With that, I'm signing off.
Amen. Ciao.